In a world that often pulls us apart, More in Common brings us back to what matters. Hosted by Gerren Taylor and Keith Richardson, this isn't your average podcast. It's a challenge to think deeper, question louder, and grow further. At More in Common, we work with NFL teams, tech companies, and professionals across industries to improve communication and foster compassion. And with a focus on emotional intelligence, we aim to bring a wealth of experience to help you navigate the complexities of human connection. We've never been more connected and yet more isolated. We want to explore the roots of that tension and offer a way back to what we all need: real human connection. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back.
Toning it down, trying to find the new rhythm.
It's a smooth in now, right? That's
Yeah.
what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like I was real punchy in the beginning.
Yeah. You brought it back last week, and now it's like, hey,
Hey
the
guys, good to see you.
The clothes are the same. We might be recording this right after. Listen, that's just a reality.
Don't look behind
that's
the
just
curtain.
The truth.
The man who's running Oz is not somebody you want to see.
We just watched Wicked. Finally,
ruins the illusion.
The other day.
Ruins the illusion.
It does. It ruins the illusion. Look, I've been thinking about just that conversation around the complexities of acceptance versus agreement. This shit's hard, right? Because it's not aligning our social expectations with hateful groups. But this in of itself, this point really kind of anchors on is something Brene Brown. You mentioned Brene Brown last week. Let's talk about Brene Brown. She talks about setting your personal values, right? And it's something that I don't think we all put enough emotional and intellectual thought into. Like, what are your values? Right? Have you ever thought about it?
Yeah, I do actually think about that kind of thing. And it is part of how I evaluate how I move in the world, what I respond to, what I don't respond to. But I do think that it's probably kind of unique in a sense. My particular unique upbringing, I've mentioned on the show before, in speech and debate, allowed me at a younger age than I would say most to start delving into philosophy, right? Locke, Hobbes, treatise of government, like why do people organize, right? And then obviously you get into Plato, Socrates, blah, blah, blah. But to me, the processing of that information helped me ground myself in the phrase that we use probably too often on the show, right? Like strongly held values, loosely held beliefs, because if you know what your values are, then I think that you are allowed to change your beliefs based on how those clashes happen in the world, right? And then better information leads to better outcomes, and hopefully, right? Like the idea is know better, do better, and so how you live up to that value structure, how you show up for that value structure on a day-to-day basis is something that's important to me. But it does also remind me of what you're saying too, though. I think people do, define their social identity often through the groups that they assign themselves to, or that where they try to fit in at. And that in itself can kind of show people what you value or what your values are by where you choose to stay, where you choose to stand.
So I think that is a really good perspective. So I'll ask the question though, what are your values? So what is that North Star for you that allows you to navigate all that?
Like literally, what are my values?
Yep.
Well, I believe in safety. right? I think people should feel safe, um, in the sense of like in a society. I think that's part of, you know, what happens. I think that people deserve the ability to explore and grow, uh, and have some basic needs met as part of the social contract, right? That is like the foundation of what I believe as far as why societies forms. I guess it's the question is like values of what and where. But ultimately, I think that when I start there, I start figuring out the other stuff, right? That like people should feel safe, as part of a society because you're in the group, right? And that people should have certain things that are provided to them as part of being in that. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think this represents the nature of this conversation, right? Is it allows us to leverage the depths of nuance in any conversation if we can anchor on a common thing, right? And like real social sorting needs to be an intellectual exercise now. Like we need to be able to organize around some of these common values because we need to be reminding ourselves of them. Because what ends up happening is even in group sorting, I mean, you saw this in women's suffrage, you saw it um, in the social movements of the 1960s. You see it now. We sort and then we disagree amongst ourselves, and then we sort again, and then we sort again, and all of a sudden we're infighting. We're fighting over everything. Like for me, my values personally are compassion and honesty, so I try to live um, compassionately, and I try to be honest all the time. From a social standpoint, my values are similar to yours, right? I think at its very core, I think of that we shouldn't, like our core value is we should seek not to harm other people, right? And, sometimes that means we don't always get things that we want, but so long as we're not hurting other people in the process for our own gain. And by using that as an anchor, it informs how I seek to find that, we'll say, common ground with other people. I don't necessarily have this conversation often enough myself, but I think back to the example you used with your friend. Like, why is he your friend? You know, like what values do you share?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can break it down and you can start having the intellectual debate, right? Like, hey, you say this, okay, you use this as supporting data. So you say, we'll use the example you use. I'm all for the Trump tariffs because in 1995, Chuck Schumer talked about tariffs. Okay, well, let's take Chuck Schumer out of the conversation for a second. How does any of that support the values that you just told me you shared, that we share? Like, how is it that you see this as, let's say the two of you shared safety as a common value or some iteration of it, similar to like you and I, we didn't use the same words, but it's generally the same sentiment. How does that create safety? And is it creating safety for others, everybody? Is it creating safety for some? Is it creating safety for you? Um, and if it's not, then we can really dig in and say, hey, then do we actually support what's happening, and what would we prefer to see happen? Right. And we have to get away from navigating these conversations that it's an all or nothing type of
Well, that's
situation,
yeah,
right?
for sure, for sure.
Because we aren't like the complexities of it all aren't binary, and we're not always going to win. Like we're
This
not always going to have the things that we want. But
actually reminds me of a concept I came across the other day. It's called the Johari window. I think it's like from a study in 1955 about self-awareness and interpersonal relationships. And there's basically like four areas, right? There's the open area, what we know of others and what we know about ourselves. the blind area, what others know about us and we don't recognize in ourselves, the hidden areas, what we know about ourselves but we don't share with other people, and then the unknown area, right? Like what we neither know about, we don't know and they don't know about our own selves, right? And
Sure,
so
sure.
if you're honest enough to at least take reflection, kind of that, then maybe, because the reason why I connected that too is because I wonder how often people could answer that question of what their values are. Are we
I
being
mean,
self-reflective enough to put words to these things?
and I think this is the fun. I mean, we talk about safety. We talk about our brain and how it wants to simplify the environment, which it does. And we take on ideologies, we take on thoughts, we take on all of these things from our experience in life. A lot of it is informed from early days, right? The way our emotional system, which informs a lot of what we think and feel, even if one might say I heard someone say it today. I take in all information. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and challenge you and tell you you don't, but we can navigate this conversation and understand like the nature of where that's influencing you, because you want to think certain things about yourself. Social desirability bias. Like, I want to think certain things about myself because it is the socially acceptable thing to think about myself. But really inspecting that, this goes back to everything that we've talked about, the emotional awareness, really understanding these things and not just taking things on face value based on our experiences in the past. We're not just inspecting other people's thoughts, we're inspecting our own feelings about things. Why is it when someone says that I feel this way? Right? Why is it that when someone thinks that thing, I feel this way? And what is wildly challenging in all of this is that this fucking thing that we're living in, this human experience with 8.1 billion other people on the planet, like, it's hard. Like, doing that work is hard. Sitting across from someone, I have to give Bill Maher credit. Like, he sat across and had a conversation with Charlie Kirk.
Mm.
Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson have a series of conversations where they talk about religion. Sam Harris is a devout atheist, and which is kind of an oxymoronic statement. If any atheists out there are listening, I recognize that. I understand that is a bit oxymoronic. But then, Jordan Peterson is a devout Christian, and they navigate and have these conversations. Now they're doing it at a very Socratic intellectual level, trying to almost win a debate in a way, but they're really trying to have a conversation at the same time. And they like each other and they get along. And we're going to disagree on how to do things. And in a democracy, we aren't all going to vote for the same person, because somebody's going to present ideas that we think are better. And another person's going to think ideas that you might think are better. And that's democracy. And then, but we have to be able to keep discussing these things in an honest way and not let the simplicity of marketing messaging, which is what propaganda is, which is what advertising is, which is what politicians use. They use that simplicity because they know just the same that you have enough shit going on in your day that you're not inspecting all of these things. Look, you and I fall into a category of people who will sit and inspect all of these things. Not everybody does. Not everybody has the time for it. Not everybody has the skill set for it. That's why we're here, right? Like, Brene, you mentioned Brene Brown. I brought it back. Like, she talks about it. Like, you should define 2 core values to who you are
Mm.
that aren't, we're not talking about family. Like, I value my family deeply. But the values I try to bring to my family are honesty and compassion. Compassion for my children, honesty in expressing all of, like, and talking through things and working through things. And that informs how we do conflict management in our house. That informs how we parent, that informs how we apologize, right? What's going on. And, you get at that level and you just keep bringing it down. But we have to be able to do this. And occasionally, yes, you're going to run into the person who is so not in the same plane of existence as you, right?
Yeah.
If I'm having a conversation with somebody and they say, my core value is that we live in a society where justice is served all the time. Okay. That's not a shared value of mine, but what's justice? Is justice making sure that someone dies because they did something bad?
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with that.
Right.
I don't agree with that level of harm, because my value is that people aren't hurt. Now, that also informs how I see a better way forward with our prison system. Like, people get hurt in our prison system, and they get hurt because of vengeance, because they might have hurt somebody else. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished, because punishment hurts. That's not the type of hurt. I don't want someone to be harmed. I want systems that give people opportunities to not be harmed and not harm others. Right. And that's core to how I look at all of these things. Economic policy, whether, what I agree with there, social justice, DEI, all of that stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we just argue over words. We argue over
Yeah.
what woke means. We argue over DEI. And it's like, can we, I'd like to see us be able to navigate more compassionate conversation where we're
I think it's a very interesting approach because I do feel like maybe there isn't enough analysis and examination of that question, right? Like I often think of stuff and I go, well, who does that serve? Like who's serviced by this action? And if I feel like when you get down to what people actually value, you'll find, as going back to your point about how politicians manipulate these things and force competition in teams, you'll find that like there's not always a lot of connection for either team between where their actual values are and what the people on their team are doing to live up to that. And
they're
that's
red or
something
blue.
that's so interesting. But it's also how we define ourselves, because it's whether or not you can have a growth mindset, the belief where you get better, you get smarter as you go along, like we were talking about, like the know better, do better mentality. Like that in and of itself allows you to kind of self-reflect on the things that are going around you and create an analysis base where you can say, okay, not dwelling on past actions or past hurts or past things, but learning from them and trying to construct a learning from them so that you can move along in the future. And we're not static creatures as we move about this mortal plane in our human skins or whatever. We are very dynamic and we are constantly being shaped by different experiences, stories, and feedback that occurs to us. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, and I was just gonna say, and like, it is understanding that, like, our common psychology and our common emotional experience, which, you know, depending on the research you read regarding free will, is not as much in control as we would like to think it is based on a developmental biology that was shaped by much smaller ecosystems. We didn't populate the planet until about 12,000 years ago, right? Like, we, for hundreds of thousands of years, went from small group to small group to small group, migrating, separating, migrating, separating. So, like, conflict created separation
Mm-hmm.
so that we could create harmony and have our shared resources and do our things and move. And then all of a sudden now, world freezes over and we have more opportunities to migrate to the Western Hemisphere, opportunities to migrate to Australia. It limits our migration. Like there are just things that have happened that have limited our ability to migrate and that have expanded our ability to migrate and do all this stuff. I think it's funny, total digression. It's like now we want to go to Mars. Why? So we can probably just sort again and ideologically send people to Mars and keep people on Earth and, go to the moon and do all that stuff. It's not so much about human species survival. It's just more sorting because we're out of room. We're out of room. So my argument in that is to say we're at 8.1 billion people. We're expected to hit 10, but by like 2050. The future evolution of our existence requires us to figure it out because the historical evidence of our existence allowed us to separate, whether it was resource separation or conflict separation or social separation, like whatever it was. So while it is ingrained in us to do this thing of sorting and all these biases, creating in-group, out-group, which we've talked about a lot in these last 2 episodes, we have to figure it out. What's the alternative if we don't, right? Like, and I say 8 billion, like stick to your regions, whatever it is, like each region has to figure it out. And then regionally, we have to figure it out collectively. But like, we've got to be able to work through this. And it requires each one of us in a meaningful way to take small steps that enable the systems that we live in to be more cooperative so that the systems that our kids grow up in are more cooperative. So then that their developmental experience when they're 50 or 60, they're anchoring on cooperation for their children. Like this isn't for us.
Right.
Like, and I mean, like, this isn't for us. And when we talk about survival, it's not just our own survival. It's our genetic survival. We all want our DNA to be passed on, right? Well, not all of us, but like biologically, like there is an instinct to pass on your
that,
genetic. Yeah. You sort for genetic sorting as well. Like that's part of it because, I want to be with these people. So the people that I procreate act, feel, look, all of the potential benefits of growing up in this society or system that you're a part of. And we want like we all want species survival. None of us goes, boy, I hope the human race dies out. I'm sure there's a person out there that would say that. Like that instinct is not there on the vast majority of human experience. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today if that were the case.
Right. It wasn't exactly easy getting here either.
Yeah, it wasn't. It's been a long journey and it's crazy. Like we see the world in the 100 years of our window. We study history and we look at all these things, but it's like, okay, how does all that influence how and where we're going? And I think right now we're at an impasse and I hope we can get through it. Because we do have more separation, more isolation, familial separation. Like it's happening differently. And there's so much conflict and we're allowing the small amounts of folks who have significant need for power for whatever reason, whether that's childhood trauma, which I would agree, I would say it's probably all related to childhood trauma in some form or fashion, going even back to Genghis Khan. Like he raided a whole bunch of people and killed a whole bunch of people for, probably because he had some childhood trauma and it was probably pretty bad. Right. And yes, you
pretty well
go ahead.
documented, in fact. No.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have, sociopaths and psychopaths, they're going to exist, but we need to, like, it is a true sentiment. The power of people is much greater than the power of politicians or leaders in those positions. But the reason why isn't just because it's a mass of people who can vote. That is the functional expression of that. The reason needs to be, in my estimation, is because we work to navigate these spaces and not hate each other because we stop talking to each other and then we put someone in a bucket over there and it's just easier. I'd rather them sit over there. It's easier. I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we do try to make things simpler in that sense, and instead of reflecting on or what we've done, you know, or what we could do things better, we kind of just keep it pushing, keep it pushing. But self reflection is hard. Like we always say on the show a lot. It takes practice. It's something that requires openness and honesty and a willingness to change, which not everybody comes across easily
Right?
to say.
Yep.
Uh, and so, you know, what practices do you recommend for the audience to kind of, you know, sharpen those things? Like, I always recommend people journal. One of my friends is recommended that I start meditating, which I'm looking into, which is not something I've done in the past, but something that I'd be, hey, willing to change, willing to see, you know, how that helps me self-reflect and organize around. Any other tips, tricks, tools that you like, Keithy?
Those are two I would have recommended as well. In the spirit of this discussion, I would challenge yourself to really just dig in on these higher level discussions with either people in your circle that you disagree with or people outside of your circle that you disagree with. Try it once. Index on how it makes you feel. Like, why are you mad? What are you mad about? What are you angry about? What are you irritated about? And then go back and do it again, knowing that that first time was probably hard and didn't go as well as you thought it would go. Right. Because that's the discomfort. We live in an era of comfort. We're all seeking comfort and perpetual happiness. Like it is documented by many different studies that part of the journey to happiness is understanding suffering, right? Like life includes pain. Like it sucks. We lose people. It's inevitable. We lose pets. It's inevitable unless you don't have a pet, right? But like we lose jobs, we change careers, we hit midlife crises. Like all of these things happen. It's all part of it. And being able to intentionally put yourself in spaces of discomfort allows you to practice the discomfort of that space, but it also just gives you practice of discomfort so that when other things come up, you can work to navigate through the discomfort of those situations. And then, hey, if you have a therapist, great, use it, use one productively, find a good one that you really work well with. I think that's another way of doing it. And I mean, at the simplest level, yeah, like don't isolate yourself, and certainly don't isolate yourself into social network online communities that are wild echo chambers for just what you think. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for our collective. And that's not going to change overnight, but every
Yeah.
one person could do something more.
Go outside more. No.
Yes to that, by the way. Yes to that.
Well, Keith, I really enjoyed breaking this down over the past couple of weeks, and I do think that hopefully people can take away and push themselves a little bit into the self reflection, into this next phase of human understanding. And to your point, I think that with everything that we face, the internet, the huge populations, the growth of cities, like our poor little human selves just aren't really, we're not doing so well with it. It's a lot going on, and so it it's important to be able to pause and reflect and at least slow down some things sometimes in order to make sense of it all. And that's why
Yep.
we have
Hey,
the More in Common podcast.
and that's why we have the More in Common podcast. And like, don't fight with everybody, but don't be afraid of a fight.
That one. Thank you all for joining us this week. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. Like, subscribe, share, do all of the things. Pass it to a friend. Send us a note if you wish. You can find us at moreincommonent.com. And, of course, in all of your favorite podcast places like YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Those things.
Those things. Those places.
We will see you next week. And don't forget, have fun.
Have a good day. Smile.
Have a great one.